Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Hope and the Truth on location at Shango. With me, the amazing, infamous Tommy Chong. Tommy, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I've got a lot of questions for you. It's going to be different from some of the stuff that you heard tonight. My first question is, I want to know about your spiritual quest from cannabis. I read a recent interview with you of how you started pursuing your finding of God.
Well, you know, I joke about it on stage a lot. In fact, I scared a lot of club owners because I come out of Cheech and Chong, and Cheech and Chong, we're fun-loving potheads and that. But my background, what really changed my life or formed my life, was my quest, my search for God. Because when I was a little kid in Sunday school in the country, they told us, God's all around. God will appear. It appears at different times throughout history for different people. And coming home, I was walking home with friends, and it was dark, very cold in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and a very crispy night. And I kept looking around trying to see if God was around, They'd say, God must be here, He's everywhere. And so I was looking around, and nothing happened. I didn't see anything. I saw the stars in the sky, and I saw the snow on the ground, and I saw my friends, and but it was just a moment. It was a very special moment that I felt years later. Mm-hmm. Even like right now, it was like I could remember it as it was yesterday. And then a couple years went by. And my brother and I were in the country again, summertime there. A holiday for country boys is that you don't wear shoes. That's a vacation. You hardly wear shoes. You don't wear shoes, don't wear socks. You wear pants. And usually it's the same pants until your mother goes, no, you're not wearing that anymore. Put that in the wash. It was bare-chested. And just running in the country. And whatever we did, we had fun. We were out there exploring, in the field, and playing and just doing our thing. And so all of a sudden, I looked in the distance. Here comes a car down the road. It's like an old Hank Williams kind of movie.
All right.
There was a dirt road, and the dust was coming up, and I saw this car coming, and then it stopped right by us. And a car in the country was very strange, like weird. Usually the only cars you ever saw was maybe an ambulance coming to take someone away, or some firemen going, somewhere. But, it was a weird thing to see a car. And so all of a sudden the car pulls up, and there were these young, I guess they were young, and to us they looked like people, a couple of girls, a couple of guys. And they said, do you boys want to go to camp? And yeah, we said, yeah. We didn't say where or what or anything. It was camp. You want to go anywhere? Do you want to go for a ride in the car? Yeah. That was fine with us. Yes. Anyway, he said, okay, well, let's drive you home to get your parents' permission. It was my mom. And so she said, it turned out to be Bible camp. Okay. For 2 weeks. And so off we went to Bible camp. And it was great. It was on a lake. It took forever to get there. We took a school bus and we drove forever. We got there. And then they assigned us to all these little cabins, little huts. And I think there was a teepee, but I was in a hut. And then they had a dining room with a stage. And then we got assigned to all these like I said, little huts. And then the first thing they did that night, they led us in prayer. And I didn't know how to pray at the time, and so they taught us how to pray. And each when we come in the cubicle and say, okay, this is what you pray, you know. So I learned how to pray, and was, oh, this is kind of cool, you know. And so I think I was about 8 years old, and I was just at that age, you know, where then everything was really, I was learning.
Yeah.
And so then we went on these little hikes. Part of the thing was swimming in the lake in the morning. There was no showers, so if you wanted to bath, you swam in the cold lake. And then we would do the Bible study. And they would sit us around outside,
Okay.
and tell us stories about the Bible. And that's what I got turned on to. And it was so fascinating to me, you know. I just loved all the stories, and I loved everything, and the message of the goodness in Jesus, and all the goodness of the stories really resonated with me. And then we had to do plays, and we did the plays weren't religious in nature; they were funny little things that we did. And then they had a what do you call it? A fire at the night where everybody sang songs, you know. And that was fun. You know, we played some stupid songs, we sang and everything else. But at the end of the week, they gave out a prize for the best boy and the best girl. Mm. And they give the prize for the best girl. And then I was bare-chested again, standing up, trying to get some food. And they said, well, keep standing, because, Tommy, you are the best guy.
Look at you.
Yeah, it was like, whoa, it was the first thing I ever would, man. I thought, wow, this is so cool. That experience stayed with me the rest of my life, because it taught me, I learned that the power of prayer.
Absolutely.
I learned it. And so that taught me through. Now, as I got older, then I started experimenting, you know, looking around and, you know, hanging out with a rough crowd, learning about girls, you know, finding out, you know, girls love the rough guys, you know, and so I tried to be a rough guy, you know, be a bad guy. And so it wasn't until I think I met my wife, not my first wife, my second, my first wife, who was a beautiful meeting too. You know, she was very young, and her brother played piano in the band, and so we all got together, and she was like, she's a black girl too, so she was my first wife. But I always had, and she's very religious, you know, Christian, played the piano in church every day, but I didn't go to her church.
Yeah.
It was something that she had to do, and anything you had to do wasn't that exciting. But anyway, I got turned on by a musician, a jazz musician. He turned me on to a book called The Third Eye, and it's by Lobsang T. Rampa.
Pineal gland. Your pineal gland.
Yeah, he was a reincarnated Tibetan from England. He was a white guy from England, but he had been reincarnated. He was originally a Tibetan, and he came back as an Englishman. And he wrote a book called The Third Eye, and was about the power of, you know, the Tibetan power, and the Book of the Dead and all that. So I got into that. And then from there, I started looking for spiritual books. And I got into Catherine Ponder. She was like another spiritualist that wrote about what you can get. And I got into that, the Book of, not the Book of Changes, I Ching. I finally got into the I Ching. Then I got into Goldsmith, and which I still am. But the one thing that Goldsmith, anyway, I learned not only the power of prayer, but I learned the power of love. And that's really the basis of humanity.
I agree. I think that's one of the reasons that I'm a little different with the way that I perceive cannabis, is that the way that decalcify your pineal gland, it's a stepping stone for faith. It's not a replacement. we worship the creation versus the creator, because God put the plants here. That's why I laugh about all regulation and everything else. It's here
Well,
to
it's
help
in the
us.
Bible, you know, it's written in the Bible, you know, I joke about it, but it's the burning bush that Moses talked to.
Absolutely.
You know, it was definitely the burning bush, and it's all throughout the Bible, you know? It's like the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. There's so many, you know, what do you call them, allegories or?
Parables.
You know, parables, you know, and then when I got turned on to Goldsmith, he's the one that told me what I know now, what I read now. And the one thing he stresses is that you cannot reveal, it's a secret, you cannot reveal the secret to people because they will, you do not cast the pearls before the swine. And that's what they are, pearls of wisdom. If you tell the wrong person, mention to the wrong person, they will, they'll either give you that or they'll, you know, they won't understand. And the reason they don't understand is because everybody has their own way of evolving. You know, it's just like the plants out in the garden there. You know, you got a plant that's just coming up, then you got one that's ready to be harvested. They have a lot in common. One is mature and ready to go, and the other one is still young and immature and not ready to go. And that's the way people are. And you can't really tell until you meet them, and then you find out that you do have a connection. And now if you have a connection, you can discuss the truth,
Of course.
but you cannot impart it on anybody.
Well, God bless you, my friend. I appreciate you coming by today. I know your time is valuable. You got a million interviews to do. But thank you, Tommy Chong, for coming by. It was my pleasure. We'll be back next week with Hope and the Truth. We'll see you next time, guys.